The maid's uniform was ruined at the wedding, but what the billionaire found in her coat pocket changed everything. The ink hit her white apron before she even saw the bottle coming. In front of 200 guests, Michael's fiancée had just destroyed the one thing keeping Amara's secret hidden. Because sewn inside that stained apron pocket was something that would end the wedding before it started. Amara didn't cry. She didn't run. She just looked straight at Michael and said nothing at all. And that silence was about to become the loudest thing in the room. Welcome back to another story about love, lies, and the people who thought they'd never get caught. If you're the kind of viewer who loves a slow burn mystery with a gut punch ending, you're exactly where you need to be. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Michael Bennett had built a $500 million real estate empire by the time he was 34, and yet the only room in his mansion that ever felt calm was the kitchen, at 6 in the morning, before anyone else was awake, before assistants, before lawyers, before Vanessa. That was when Amara Coleman came in to start her shift. She'd worked for the Bennett estate for 11 months. She arrived before the sun, left after dark, and never once complained about either. She was 27, quiet in the way that people mistake for shy, though anyone who watched her closely would have noticed she missed nothing. She noticed which glass Michael liked his orange juice in. She noticed when the household staff whispered about Vanessa behind closed doors. She noticed, 4 months ago, that Vanessa Cole, Michael's fiancée of 8 months, had started locking her study door. Amara wasn't paid to Nemestins. She was paid to clean, to organize, to keep a household of 14,000 square feet from falling into chaos. But a woman raising a 3-year-old alone on a maid salary in a city where rent ate half of what she made, she learned early that noticing things was how you survived. Her daughter, Nora, was the reason she took this job in the first place. Single motherhood didn't leave room for pride. When the agency called and said the position paid nearly double what she made at her last house, Amara didn't ask questions. She showed up, did the work well, and kept her head down. Michael liked her, not in any complicated way. He simply respected competence, and Amara had it in abundance. He'd stop in the kitchen some mornings, coffee in hand, and ask how her daughter was doing in preschool, whether the bus route was still giving her trouble. Small kindnesses, the kind a busy, wealthy man could afford to hand out without thinking twice. Vanessa noticed those small kindnesses too. And she hated them. Vanessa Cole was, by every visible measure, exactly what Michael's world expected of him. Blonde, polished, raised in old money that had quietly run dry a decade before she met him. She was charming at dinner parties, warm in front of Michael's business partners, generous with compliments that always seemed to land exactly where they'd do the most good for her. Behind closed doors, she was someone else entirely. "You left a streak on the mirror in my dressing room," Vanessa said one Tuesday morning, holding her coffee like a queen holding court, watching Amara wipe down the counter. "I don't pay attention to much, but I notice things like that." Amara didn't respond right away. She'd learned that responding gave Vanessa exactly what she wanted. "I'll take care of it," she said simply, and went back to work. It wasn't the words that stung. It was the tone, the practiced condescension of someone who knew exactly how much power she held over a woman who needed this job to keep her daughter fed. The engagement had happened fast. Michael, usually careful and deliberate in every decision he made, had proposed after only 5 months of dating. His friends were surprised. His mother, quietly, was not thrilled, though she never said so directly, not to Michael. She'd mentioned it once to Amara, in passing, while Amara was arranging flowers for a dinner party. "He falls hard and fast, my son. Always has. Doesn't always see clearly when he does." Amara had said nothing. It wasn't her place. But she'd started to see things too. Little things. Vanessa's phone, which she guarded like a state secret, always face down, always locked, always in her hand, even in the bathroom. The new habit of long afternoon meetings with her wedding planner that somehow never showed up on the shared household calendar. The way Vanessa's mood shifted sharply whenever a certain contractor's name came up in conversation, a man named Dale Whitfield, who was overseeing renovations on the guest house. None of it was Amara's business. She told herself that every single day. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, something happened that made it her business, whether she wanted it to be or not. She was cleaning the study, a room she rarely entered since Vanessa kept it locked, but the door had been left ajar that morning, likely in the rush of wedding preparations. On the desk, half hidden under a stack of seating charts, was an envelope, unlabeled. Amara wasn't the type to snoop. She picked it up only to move it so she could dust beneath it, and that was when it slipped from her hand and spilled its contents across the floor. Photographs. Vanessa and Dale Whitfield, unmistakably close, at what looked like a hotel bar. And a folded piece of paper, a bank statement, the kind of document Amara had no business reading, but her eyes caught the numbers before she could stop herself. Transfers, large ones, moving from an account with Michael's name on it into one she didn't recognize. Amara's hands were shaking as she gathered everything back into the envelope. She placed it exactly where she'd found it, careful, precise, and walked out of that study feeling like she'd swallowed a stone. She told herself it wasn't her problem. She told herself Michael was a grown man who would figure out his own relationship. She told herself a dozen things over the following days, trying to talk herself into staying silent, into staying small, into staying safe. But that night, watching her daughter sleep, Amara knew silence wasn't really a choice, not for someone who valued the truth. The only question was what she was going to do about it, and whether doing anything at all would cost her everything she had left to lose. 3 days later, Vanessa found out someone had been in her study. Vanessa noticed the envelope had been moved before she noticed anything was missing from it. That was the first mistake, hers, not Amara's. She'd left it 2 inches from where she always kept it, a habit so ingrained she didn't even realize she'd developed it until the day it betrayed her. She didn't confront anyone directly. That wasn't how Vanessa operated. Instead, she started watching. She watched the household staff rotation. She watched who had access to the second floor during the hours she was out. And within 2 days, she'd narrowed her suspicion down to exactly one person, the maid who cleaned that wing of the house every morning, the one Michael always seemed to have a kind word for. Vanessa's campaign began quietly, the way real damage usually does. "I think something's missing from my jewelry box," she mentioned to Michael over dinner, delicately, like it pained her to say it. "I'm not accusing anyone. I don't know. Maybe I misplaced it." Michael frowned. "What's missing?" "A bracelet, my grandmother's. I'm sure it'll turn up." She let the sentence hang there, unfinished, planting exactly the seed she wanted to plant. It didn't turn up because nothing was actually missing. But 3 days later, when Michael happened to walk past Amara's small locker in the staff area, a locker he rarely had reason to notice, he saw through the half-open door a flash of gold chain tucked into the corner of her bag. He didn't say anything. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, and something about the whole situation nagged at him in a way he couldn't articulate. But it planted a seed of its own, a small, uncomfortable one, the kind that doesn't go away just because you tell yourself it's nothing. What Michael didn't know, what he had no way of knowing, was that the bracelet in Amara's back was her own, a thin gold chain that had belonged to her mother, the only piece of jewelry she owned. And what he also didn't know was that Vanessa had walked past that locker herself, twice in the days before he noticed it. Amara felt the shift in the house almost immediately. The staff had started treating her differently, a little cooler, a little more distant. She didn't understand why, until Priya, one of the housekeepers, pulled her aside near the laundry room. "Vanessa has been asking questions about you," Priya said quietly, "about your background, whether you've ever had any issues at other jobs." Amara's stomach dropped. "What kind of issues?" "I don't know exactly, but she's been talking to Marcus in HR, and she mentioned something about a missing bracelet." Priya hesitated. "Be careful, Amara. I don't know what she's planning, but she's planning something." That night, for the first time in almost a year of employment, Amara considered quitting. She thought about her daughter, about the stability this job had finally given them after years of scraping by, and she thought about how quickly all of it could be taken from her by a woman who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. But quitting felt like running from something she hadn't done. And Amara Coleman had never been the type to run from anything, not even when running would have been easier. The following week, the household calendar showed a private dinner between Michael and Vanessa's family, a small, tense affair that Amara wasn't scheduled to work, but Priya called in sick that morning, and Amara was asked to cover. It was during that dinner that Amara overheard something she wasn't meant to hear. She was clearing plates near the hallway when Vanessa's mother, 2 glasses of wine deep, said something that made Amara freeze mid-step. "Are you sure this Dale situation is handled? Because if Michael finds anything—" "It's handled, Mom," Vanessa cut in sharply, glancing toward the hallway. "Keep your voice down." Amara moved on quickly, heart pounding, pretending she hadn't heard a word. But she had, and now she carried 2 secrets instead of one: the affair and whatever situation Vanessa was working so hard to keep hidden. She didn't know what to do with what she knew. Telling Michael felt impossible. Who would believe the maid over the fiancé, especially now that Vanessa had already started laying the groundwork to make her look untrustworthy? But staying silent felt like watching a man walk toward a cliff without saying a word. 2 nights later, Amara found something else. Tucked behind a drawer in the guest house where she'd been sent to prepare linens for out-of-town family arriving for the wedding, she found a small notebook. Dale Whitfield's handwriting, she guessed, based on the initials scrawled on the inside cover. Inside were notes, dates, dollar amounts, and a phrase that stopped her cold. V says once the wedding's final, harder to reverse the transfers, has to happen before. Amara didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough to know this wasn't just an affair, it was something bigger. And the wedding, now 9 days away, wasn't just a celebration, it was a deadline. Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table long after Nora had gone to bed, the notebook's words running through her mind on a loop. Once the wedding's final, harder to reverse the transfers, has to happen before. She wasn't a lawyer or a financial expert, but she'd worked in enough wealthy households over the years to understand the shape of what she was looking at. Money was moving, a wedding was the trigger, and whatever protection Vanessa was trying to lock in, it depended entirely on Michael saying "I do." The next morning, Amara made a decision she'd go back and forth on for days. She photographed the notebook page with her phone before returning it exactly where she'd found it. She told herself it was just in case she needed proof one day that she wasn't lying, that she wasn't some disgruntled employee inventing stories out of spite. She had no plan for what to do with the photo. She just knew she needed it to exist somewhere besides her own memory. 3 days passed without incident, and Amara almost let herself believe the storm had quieted. Then Vanessa called her into the study. the same study where this whole thing had started weeks earlier. "Close the door," Vanessa said, not looking up from her laptop. Amara did, her pulse quickening. "I know you've been in my things," Vanessa said finally, turning to face her. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant, which somehow made it worse. "I don't know exactly what you saw, but I know you saw something. I clean this house, Miss Cole. I don't go through anyone's belongings." "Don't." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not stupid, and I don't appreciate being treated like I am. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget whatever you think you saw, and in exchange, I'm going to forget about a missing bracelet and about a background check that might turn up complications for a woman in your position if HR decides to look a little closer at your employment history." Amara felt something harden in her chest. "There's nothing in my employment history to find. There's always something if someone wants to find it badly enough." Vanessa stood, smoothing her dress, every movement deliberate. "You have a daughter, don't you? I'd hate for anything to disrupt her life. Children need stability." It wasn't a threat stated outright. It didn't need to be. Amara understood exactly what she was being told, and for the first time since this all began, she felt real fear, not for herself, but for Nora. She left the study without another word, because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't make things worse. That evening, something unexpected happened. Michael found her in the kitchen, later than usual, staring at nothing while a pot of tea went cold in front of her. "You okay?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice, the kind that had nothing to do with obligation. Amara almost told him everything right there: the affair, the transfers, the threat. The words were right at the edge of her mouth, and then she thought about Vanessa's smile, about the phrase background check, about how easily a powerful family could make a poor woman's life difficult if they decided to.
"Just tired," she said instead. "Long week." Michael studied her for a moment longer than the answer warranted. He'd noticed the tension in the house lately, Vanessa's strange questions to HR, the missing bracelet that never quite got resolved, the way the staff had all grown quieter around him, like they were carrying something they didn't want him to see. He didn't push Amara that night, but something in him had started to shift, a low, persistent unease that he couldn't yet name, but couldn't ignore either. The turning point came 4 days before the wedding, when Michael's accountant called him with a routine question about a transfer authorization he didn't remember approving. It was a modest amount compared to his overall portfolio, $60,000, but it was enough to make him ask questions. "When was this authorized?" he asked. 3 weeks ago. It went through the joint premarital account. Your fiancé's signature is on it, along with yours, though the notation says you authorized it verbally." Michael hadn't authorized anything verbally. He hadn't authorized it at all. He didn't confront Vanessa immediately. Instead, quietly, carefully, the way he handled every major business decision, he asked his accountant to compile a full history of the joint account's activity over the past 6 months.
What came back 3 days later stopped him cold. A pattern of transfers, small enough individually to avoid drawing attention, but adding up to nearly $400,000, all routed to an account under a name he didn't recognize, Dale Whitfield. Michael sat with that name for a long time, turning it over, trying to place it. Then he remembered, the contractor overseeing the guest house renovation, a man Vanessa had insisted on hiring personally, over Michael's suggestion of using his usual contractor. For the first time since the engagement began, Michael allowed himself to consider a possibility he'd been avoiding, that he didn't fully know the woman he was about to marry. 2 days before the wedding, the house was a storm of florists, caterers, and last-minute fittings, and Amara moved through it all trying to disappear into the background the way she always had. but disappearing had gotten harder. Vanessa's eyes followed her now whenever they were in the same room, sharp and watchful, like she was waiting for Amara to make one wrong move. Michael, meanwhile, had grown quieter. He'd started asking Amara small, seemingly unrelated questions about the guest house renovation, about whether she'd ever met Dale Whitfield, about how long the notebook Priya mentioned finding once in the guest house had been there.
There, Amara answered carefully, giving him true information without volunteering more than he asked, still terrified of what would happen to her and Nora if this exploded, and she was the one blamed for it. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said, finding her alone in the pantry the evening before the rehearsal dinner. "And I need you to be honest with me, whatever the cost." Amara's chest tightened. "Okay." "Has Vanessa threatened you? About anything?" The question hung in the air between them. Amara had spent weeks rehearsing what she'd say if this moment ever came, and now that it had, every rehearsed line evaporated. "Mr. Bennett, Michael," he corrected gently. "And I already know something's wrong. I've known for weeks. I just need someone to tell me the truth, because everyone in this house is protecting themselves instead of telling me what's actually going on." Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then, finally, she told him. Not everything. Not yet. Not the full weight of the notebook and the transfers and the threats. But enough. The photographs in the study. The overheard conversation about the situation needing to be handled before the wedding. The threat Vanessa had made about her employment history and her daughter. Michael listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with every sentence, until Amara finished and the pantry fell into a heavy silence. "Show me," he said finally. "Show me." Amara hesitated only a moment before pulling out her phone and showing him the photo she'd taken of the notebook page weeks earlier. Michael read it twice, his face draining of color. "This is Dale's handwriting," he said quietly. "I recognize it from the renovation invoices." He looked up at her, and something in his expression had changed completely. Not suspicion anymore, but a kind of grim clarity. "I need you to do one more thing for me, and I promise you, whatever happens after this, you and your daughter will be protected. I give you my word." The rehearsal dinner the next night was tense, in a way only Michael and Amara understood. Vanessa played her role beautifully, laughing at the right moments, thanking guests for coming, glowing under the string lights like a woman with nothing to hide. Michael watched her with new eyes, seeing the performance for what it was. Toward the end of the evening, Michael's accountant sent a final message confirming what he'd already suspected. The transfers had accelerated in the past week, with a final, larger transaction scheduled to process the morning after the wedding, timed precisely to take advantage of the new joint financial status marriage would create. There was no more room for doubt. But Michael, methodical even in heartbreak, didn't want to confront Vanessa privately, where she could deny everything and spin a story before he had a chance to verify it fully. He wanted the truth to come out, where it couldn't be buried or twisted. He decided it would come out at the wedding itself. That decision, quiet, controlled, devastating in its patience, would collide the very next day with something neither of them had planned for: Vanessa's own paranoia finally boiling over in front of every guest they had invited. Because that morning, adjusting the final seating chart, Vanessa noticed the ink-stained corner of a document peeking out from Amara's apron pocket, a section of the same notebook page
printed and tucked away for safekeeping, that Amara had foolishly carried with her that morning out of nerves, unsure of what the day would bring. Vanessa didn't wait for answers. She didn't think. She simply reacted, grabbing the nearest thing on the gift table, a bottle of ceremonial ink meant for the wedding's unity ritual, and threw it, ruining Amara's uniform, and, without realizing it, exposing herself in front of everyone. The ballroom went silent, the way rooms do right before something irreversible happens. Amara stood frozen, ink dripping down the front of her apron, the printed page falling from her ruined pocket onto the marble floor. 200 guests stared. Somewhere near the back, a photographer's camera clicked, capturing the moment without anyone telling it to stop. Vanessa's chest heaved, the empty ink bottle still in her hand, her carefully constructed composure completely gone.
"Pick that up," she snapped at Amara, pointing at the fallen page. "Whatever that is, pick it up and get out of my sight." Michael crossed the room before she finished speaking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply bent down, picked up the page himself, and looked at it. The same page he'd already seen. The same handwriting he now recognized instantly. "Vanessa," he said, his voice carrying easily in the stunned silence, "why don't you tell everyone what this is?" Vanessa's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, fear, and finally a kind of cornered fury. "Michael, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time." He turned to face the room, page in hand. "This is a page from a notebook belonging to Dale Mitfield. It details financial transfers from our joint account, transfers Vanessa authorized without my knowledge, time to finalize the moment we were legally married." He looked back at her. "Nearly $400,000, Vanessa, and another transaction scheduled for tomorrow morning." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's mother went pale near the front row. Vanessa herself opened her mouth, searching for something, anything to say, but nothing came. "I want to be very clear," Michael continued, quieter now, though every word still carried. "This isn't about Amara." "Amara didn't do anything wrong, except tell me the truth, when everyone else in my life was too afraid or too complicit to do it. She's been threatened, harassed, and nearly had her reputation destroyed to protect a secret that was never hers to keep." He turned to Amara, who stood frozen amid the ruin of her uniform, ink still dripping from the apron she'd worn every day for 11 months without complaint. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it in a way that went beyond the ink, beyond the accusations, beyond everything that had happened in the past weeks. "You should never have had to carry this alone." Amara's throat tightened, but she held herself steady, the way she always had. "I just told the truth," she said quietly. "That's all I did." "That's more than most people manage," Michael said. Vanessa, realizing the room had entirely turned against her, tried one last time to salvage the moment. "Michael, please, we can talk about this privately. We don't have to." "We're done talking privately," Michael said. "You made sure of that when you decided the truth was worth destroying someone's dignity to protect." Security, quietly instructed earlier that morning by Michael, who had anticipated some version of this confrontation, escorted Vanessa and, separately, Dale Whitfield, who'd been seated among the groomsman's family under a false pretense of friendship, out of the venue. The wedding, obviously, did not proceed. But something else did in the weeks that followed that mattered far more to the people actually affected by what had happened. Michael made good on his promise. He covered the cost of Amara's ruined uniform without her asking, then insisted, over her protests, on covering a full year of preschool tuition for Nora, calling it long overdue back pay for months of loyalty that had gone unrewarded and unprotected. He connected Amara with his own attorney, at no cost to her, to formally document everything Vanessa had done,
ensuring there would be no retaliation, no manufactured background check, no consequences for a woman who had done nothing but tell the truth under pressure. Vanessa faced real consequences too, not cartoonish, not exaggerated, but real. Michael's legal team pursued the fraudulent transfers aggressively, and within 2 months, both Vanessa and Dale were facing formal charges related to financial fraud. Vanessa's carefully built social standing, the one she'd protected so fiercely at Amara's expense, crumbled in the aftermath. Invitations stopped, friendships dissolved, the version of her life she'd fought so hard to preserve, gone in the same afternoon she'd once believed would secure it forever. Amara didn't take any satisfaction in that. She'd never wanted revenge. She'd only ever wanted to survive with her dignity intact, to protect her daughter, and to do the right thing, even when it terrified her.
6 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Amara stood in the same kitchen where this had all started, pouring coffee into the same glass she always used for Michael when he walked in earlier than usual. "I've been thinking," he said, "about starting a scholarship program for working mothers going back to school. I want your input if you'd be willing to help me build it." Amara looked at him, surprised. "I'm not exactly qualified for something like that." "You're exactly qualified," Michael said. "You're the only person in this house who was ever honest with me when it actually cost you something." Amara smiled, a real one, quiet and steady, the kind that had carried her through every difficult month leading up to this one. "Okay," she said, "I'm in." Outside, Nora's laughter echoed faintly from the garden, where she was chasing butterflies with no idea of the storm her mother had weathered to give her a life like this, safe, stable, and finally, truly her own. If you were in Amara's position, would you have stayed silent to protect your job or told the truth no matter the risk? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and we'll see you in the next story.